Hey YouTube, what are we doing today?
We are going to talk about the different champions and how we think they will fare moving into the new set with the spoilers that we've already seen.
Predictions.
Yeah,
There you go. Predictions of the champions.
We've seen about 150 spoilers out of the 210-ish card set.
Yeah, roughly on average.
Something like 60 more unknown cards, but the spoilers have been coming pretty slowly. Mm-hmm. So we're just using the info that we can, right? Because I think everyone's still really excited for California and trying to get there. So, very interesting that we don't have the spoilers so far, all of them, for how early they started into the season. And hopefully we'll see a little bit more of a condensed spoiler season next set, because it's kind of feeling like that'd be a little bit better for everyone involved.
We were planning on doing our predictions of cards.
Our set review.
And stuff like that. It's not happening currently. So we're going to do predictions for the current champions that we know and what we think they'll be like in ALC. So we'll just start off with, let's say, the strongest one probably right now, one of the strongest ones, which is Merlin. Mm-hmm. And I'll say specifically level 3 Merlin.
Yeah.
We're not going to bring up specifically like each. We're not going to do like a tier list, just whether or not it's better, worse, or about the same as it is in the set. And we'll just go through each of us. Kevin, want to start?
Yeah, so I mean, Ghost of Pendragon is still basically the best card in the game, right? Like, that card is unbelievable. So being behind Crux, I think it just still is going to allow Lorraine and Merlin to do some crazy stuff. Merlin keeping on with that level 3 effect, always getting value from that effect, unlike other level 3 champions out there, is also going to keep her on tier with, because every single level 3 that we've seen so far, not every single one, most level 3s from ALC are more of a Merlin-esque effect, where every single turn you're going to get some value out of it. Yeah. And like Turneris, like, you stop getting value eventually, but like you still get value 3 turns in a row, and once you got that engine set up, you're kind of set. So, it definitely, I think Merlin's strength there, it will always be persistent. And the Crux typing is still strong. We've seen some really cool third element cards, new ones from ALC for the new elements, but Crux obviously still did really well so far for the whole length of this game's history. So I think it's still going to be, Ghost of Pendragon, Ascension, all these cards are still really good.
So, better, same, or worse?
Better, same, or worse? Man, that's a hard... Probably same. I want to say same, because...
It's already really powerful.
It's already really powerful, and I think that a lot of people will realize how good it still is and take that as a comfort pick to a big event at the beginning. And I think we might see it get worse as the meta progresses.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think my guess is the same, because it will get a little support, not a ton, like a full support, like more like Crux cards, something like that. But I think a ton of Crux cards. Maybe there's still a couple that will get released, but it'll be about the same. It's like you said, very strong. So
I think that out the gates it will be stronger personally, and the reason being is because currently we're missing 60 cards, obviously still. But in what I've seen, and I've talked about it before in our Patreon podcast, so definitely check that out if you haven't. But currently, we do not have the support in any element, any advanced element, where you can rush level up and then regain those cards in a hurry, right? Like Ghost of Pendragon, Ascensions, like Prismatic Ascensions and things like that. Crux still has, I mean, like you said, Ghost of Pendragon. Currently, we don't have a card that has that same level of power.
Yeah.
So being able to rush yourself as fast as you can, like I played a Fire Merlin deck at Auckland, and I think that same exact deck with some upgrades is going to be around.
Yeah,
sure.
And I think that out the gates, people trying to play these really... So going off of what you said about Merlin level 3 and the way that her powers, I think the word that you're looking for and the word that has been used in the past is it's a level 3 champ that adds inevitability, right? When you play Merlin level 3 and you're playing against the Fire Merlin particularly, you know that at some point you will lose the game.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about it. If you don't end the game and you don't push through their incremental advantage, they're going to slowly start drawing. Eventually they're going to be a high enough level where they just cast the fireball and you die, right?
Compared to something like Mana Weaver Rye, where they have to draw their card to use with their effect.
Yeah.
Or Xander Blinding Steel, same thing, right? Or, Crux Knight Lorraine. Crux Knight Lorraine, you get a big tempo swing because you get another materialization basically with that free sword. then that's that,
Yep.
right? And then if you're staring down a Merlin, you know that they're
going to get the
there.
bonus attacks every
They're
other
going
turn.
to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've how many games have you played? You've played so much Wind Merlin that has almost no chance to beat Rye. And how many you've played games where they draw through their entire deck and just don't draw the win con, right?
Yeah.
And you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, I still just won because I got to this point, right? But all that being said, I do think there's a lot more powerful stuff, and I think that the starter deck Tony, which is the one that gives you the every turn you get a new token.
For 3 turns.
For 3 turns, and they all like go off each other's back and power each other's up for their ability costs.
Which, when
like
you're
that.
playing that card, it's going to feel like every turn, because if you're in the length of the game where you're already at your level 3, and then you're getting 3 turns past that to unlock his full power, game's probably over.
Yeah.
So,
that's
So why don't you start on Rye, Terry?
yeah. So Rye, I was talking about this earlier today. I think that Rye out the gates. I think all of these decks that have been incredibly consistent for us through DOA and FTC are going to still be the best decks week 1 through 4.
Yeah.
People are going to be trying to figure out, they're going to have unoptimized Cleric Arsana lists. They're going to have Tony lists that are incredibly slow, and they're just going to lose to a turn 4 combo kill by Arcane Rye.
Yeah.
I think Arcane Rye, there are more counter spells in the format, which I think does hurt them, but I also think that there is going to be cards that can be interchanged with some of the cards that are currently in their deck that feel a little or maybe there'll be a new way to maybe we'll see Turbo Rye come back because you see all these really slow decks and you're like, okay, well, if I just combo out faster, I'll win the game.
To me, Rye has felt like the most inevitable aggro deck ever in this game's existence, right? Like Fire Aggro Lorraine, definitely a faster deck, can usually kill you more quickly, but it also has more ways to stop that. Because even like you said, a counter card against Rye still not might like let you do everything, right? But like a Fracturized Lantern against Fire Aggro Lorraine, well, you're gonna have some turns for sure. But Rye is still always like, I'm gonna kill you quick. There's not really much you can do about it, so you better have a game plan on how to kill me, right?
I just realized I'm probably still getting cut off from the screen here, but I'm fine.
Just shrink down a little bit.
Crouch.
Hey guys. But yeah, I think that Rye is probably overall early on in the set going to be stronger once people figure out how to play the other elements and kind of the speed of the format actually develops. I think that it'll probably get worse. But it's a deck that I don't think you can kill. I think that, and I said this, dude, this was one of the things that kind of pushed me away from GA at the very beginning of the game is I started playing, you introduced me to the game, and the first deck you put in my hands was Rye. And I remember playing it, and it feels like Storm from Magic, which is a crazy deck in a modern format, in an older format, and it has bits and pieces from tons of different sets. This Rye deck felt like we were 10 sets into GA. It has so much support, and it's so streamlined to be built that I was like, it's so hard because even when you bring in a bunch of new cards, like we saw a ton of new Arcane cards that had a ton of synergy with Arcane Rye, but barely any of them got played. Some lists tried them or played like a couple of them, but like you still saw all the same. Even when they got rid of Reckless Conversion, they didn't add in a bunch of new Arcane cards. They still did the same thing because they were like, oh, hey.
Well, Rye's funny though because like, you know, there is the way that people are playing Rye right now, which is high risk, high reward. You ask any main Rye player out there, it is a love story hate relationship with, or love hate relationship with Rye, right? And so there's definitely different ways to build Rye. It's just they aren't as powerful as that one, which is usually where people go. But yeah, I mean, I think Rye might even see maybe a little bit more of a control pickup in the set in the long term, not right away, not at California. But I could see some sort of like water Rye kind of control coming up, and then like we start to get to see actually different sort of Rye builds. Because right now I do agree with you. The fine-tuned Rye's going to win or lose list is going to still do well at the beginning for sure.
I'd say it's the same going into the set, but eventually a different type of Rye. I could definitely easily see a different type of Rye becoming stronger and being better against whatever meta that.
So you guys want to skip Sylvie and Xander and go record the Patreon video now, or are we going to still bring them up?
We'll briefly talk about Sylvie. Sylvie currently has shown no love in the new set, so there was and it was already struggling before. And so if it still sees none, it literally
gets worse.
It literally gets worse because other things are better. So
I think there's some really dedicated Sylvie fans out there that have had some mild success with Sylvie. We've seen a second place Alan, right, in her regionals.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen those random little ones pop up here and there. But yeah, I think it already is such a struggle to pick up a tamer class right now. And you throw it into a huge set that is just designed
Getting extra value. And
it's just, it's going to get so much worse.
We'll see exactly how it ends up, panning out. And I think that the new Divine Relic does actually help Sylvie if they end up able to utilize it correctly.
Yeah.
But it also really hurts them if people are playing a ton of Regalia hate and they are hating that card, because you're already behind, and then playing a card like that doesn't, if it gets destroyed without giving you any advantage, then it's like,
yeah,
wow.
And Sylvie's already, like, honestly really Regalia dependent, right?
Yeah,
so it's
yes,
like,
very
now
much
that
so.
there is a colorless Regalia hate card, that could just be so much worse for that class too.
Yeah, and we will see how that all works out, obviously. But I do think that, Sylvie does powerful stuff, but it just doesn't do it efficiently enough, and it's too easy to be dealt with.
Yeah.
There isn't really anything that happens that deck can do that is incredibly inevitable.
Sylvie has some of the strongest cards in the game, but it's almost impossible to pull them off. And so when you compare it to something like Ghost of Pendragon, play this card, draw 2, 3/4 body for 2, like,
that's crazy.
It's pretty hard, because then you look at Crawl and it's like, dang, that's a sick card. Might win the game if you get it out, but there's still outs to it, and it's super hard to get out in the first
Other
place.
steps before you can play it. Still.
So
other materializations
And
sometimes.
as long as
play.
there's cards like Dream Fairy in the game, she'll always have a hard time being very competitive, because Dream Fairy just stops anything that they could possibly want to do.
big threats are.
Yeah,
the 10-11 green slime that's out. Yeah, you just go, all right, Dream Fairy.
Yeah. Or Zephyr it even, or Displace it even. Like, well, Displace. Sorry, bad example.
But
that is, and I do think going forward to Assassin, because I do want to talk about Xander too on the YouTube portion before we move on to the new champs and talk about it on Patreon. I personally think that Xander is going to get better. I think people are starting to figure out ways to play Xander, and we're starting to see more and more lists kind of push their way to the forefront. We saw the Serene Spirit Fire Xander that had some success at our regional, which was really cool. And I think that deck has a lot of potential. And I also think that this format is going to inevitably get a lot slower. And so, Xander's effect, if we're worried about a slower format, if we're worried about counterspells, if we're worried about, a more control-esque style of game, his level 3 ability that reveals and then the effects hit the stack, that becomes incredibly more powerful. Especially in a deck that is, if Cleric becomes the best deck in the format.
Yeah, and it's a super counter-heavy format, and now they have to put their counters down.
Yeah, and depending on how we do it, we have more time because they're not killing us as fast. And we already know, no one would deny that Luxem, when you have the engine going full out, is probably the strongest engine in the game. But the issue is getting to that point without dying, and then consistently getting that engine online.
And still not getting one shot. Because Luxem, if it gets one shot, can't do anything about it. So if Rise around, it just dies.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because I do think that's their worst, but I know that like the Serene Spirit version had like some decent fight against Rai. I watched Noel play a match against Eli, our friend Eli, on Rai, and they ended up drawing in game 3, but it was a grueling 3 games.
Yeah, but Eli's trash, right?
No, man. Oh, Eli.
Also, going off of Xander though, because also you guys were ready to move on to like the end of the video, and so we still got Lorraine, which we haven't talked about. But also in terms of Xander, there is a case where Fire Aggro Xander does become quite a bit better, I think, personally. There is a lot more support for like instant damage, and about going when you go to low hand size or low like influence about stuff that you can draw back up and getting more resources from that. So
it'll be interesting. Fire Xander is actually like one of the best aggro decks out there right now, but it's also the most inconsistent one, right? So it's kind of
very fragile.
It's very fragile. So
it consistently does it. It's just easy to counter.
I think the Fire Aggro Xander that'll come out of ALC will be much different than the Fire Aggro Xander here. I think that's the list that'll change the most, right? Rai is going to stay pretty much the same. Merlin's probably going to stay pretty similar.
Pretty
similar. Even Xander, honestly, again, probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about specifically Fire Aggro Xander, that's one that I see the biggest core cards moving out of. So that one will be interesting, and I'm still reserving my judgment on that because I think it'll be such a different deck that you just kind of have to see how it goes. Yeah. But it definitely could be good.
And then Lorraine. What you kind of brought up and stuff about Crux with Pendragons, which are very good. We've had so many different types of Lorraine lists. There's been complete aggro. There's been the water mid range, and then there's been stuff like Onsol, which have all done well, might I add.
And it's interesting because Onsol, people were like, "Oh, it's dead because of Resolute," right? And so I've seen some of the new floodgates from the set, right, which I think we should definitely talk about. And one of them is your units get stealth, right? So honestly, if people are relying on that floodgate too heavily, Onsol Lorraine could be cracked because what you do is you Onsol break all of your weapons if you have a target to actually you can't break your weapons. So all right, you're gonna have to edit that out because
we're leaving it in.
Well, no, so actually maybe Onsol is just dead in the water.
Yeah,
Onsol's already going to have a much harder time with more counters in the format, and
that's true too, for sure.
And more floodgates.
So Onsol Lorraine absolutely gets worse.
And there's also the one cost card where all their attacks cost one more too.
Yep. And Crux Lorraine's already barely seen anything. You have niche examples like we used it for a very, very particular strategy, but I think in general, Lorraine absolutely gets worse. That's where I'm going to go with this.
I think you'll see some mid-range lists, and I think that the water Lorraine list that we kind of played at Auckland, well, you guys played, I didn't play it, but that list that we kind of pioneered out there, I think that deck still has a lot of legs, and I think that more mid-rangey lists will do well.
I should have said level 3 Lorraines get much worse. I don't think Spirit Ruler and Crux Knight are going to be barely played. The water deck that we played did play Spirit Ruler, fair, but that was not the main engine of it, right? I think Lorraine's going to be that level 1, level 2 kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, bringing out a sword for free when you level up one is still very strong.
Yeah. I would say that might also depend on if there's other swords that seem really, really strong. That have different abilities. I know we've seen some, but none that I feel like really make a big enough difference. I'm not sure yet, but that'd be something interesting to look at too.
But it's also interesting because I think Lorraine gets worse because even that level 1, level 2 strategy, the mid-range kind of things, you have decks like Tony that are going to be fighting for that spot too, right? So Tony has a lot of viability for keeping your board alive and stuff like that. Sure, you don't get the weapon, but having allies on board is really important in those ally aggro strategies. So I say it gets worse. I say every single version of Lorraine gets worse because it's going to be having to fight for the level 3s get so much worse compared to how many other good level 3s that we get.
Worse.
Level 1s, yeah.
What do you say?
Lorraine?
Yeah. Worse, even, or better?
I think the big Lorraines, the level 3s definitely get worse. I think that the more low to the ground Lorraines are about the same. I think that out the gates, they'll probably be very good.
Yeah.
But once people figure out how to play Tony efficiently, I think that Tony single-handedly makes low to the ground Lorraine strategies way worse.
Yeah.
So once people figure out the correct way to play that card and to play that class in general, I think that Warrior will have a lot more trouble.
And it is also Tony is Toneris for maybe a newer viewer. And also it is interesting because we are getting such a heavy delay with the spoilers. Now, the more that's delayed, I think the better every single DOA class is, right? Because less time that we have to try to figure out
specifically for California.
Specifically for California, yes. Sorry, that is what I meant. Yeah. So the less time that we have to figure out ally Tony, cleric, all that kind of stuff, right? Then I am going to take Lorraine allies over Tony allies. Yeah, you guys heard it here. Inside scoop of what I'm bringing to California. No, but if I'm choosing between those two decks, right, I'm choosing ally Lorraine over Tony Lorraine if I only have 2 weeks to prep with Tony, right?
I think at that point, we'll probably move over to the Patreon.
Yeah, we won't talk about Mordred or Alan.
Yeah.
Sad.
They're all bad.
Sad day.
Sorry, guys.
Or Tristan, sorry.
Sorry. Oh yeah, they love
Prove us
Tristan.
wrong. Bring it to Ascent. Whoop
Beat
our
us.
butt. Yeah, like
We'll give you a prize.
Well, yeah.
If you beat me
Yeah.
with Tristan, I will give you something.
But yeah, if you guys want to hear about the exciting new champions coming out in ALC and our thoughts on them, maybe some strategy tips and all that kind of stuff, go check out our Patreon. It is in the link below. We do a lot of content over there, so barely any people cancel once they sign up. I think a lot of people agree that it is well worth the membership. So we'll see you guys over there.
Yes.